And yes, indeed, what I decided to talk about today is our recent study, which I conducted together with two of my colleagues, Beata Osiewalska and Anna Kurowska from the University of Warsaw, on home-based work and fertility. And it's based on the British data. So actually, a very good coincidence, and all the comments are very much welcome from you, since it is still work in progress. The study is based, just to say, the study is based still in the pre-pandemic context. So when I was writing my RC grant, the COVID, we didn't know, we didn't even hear the word yet. And the plan was to study how the developments in the labor market driven by digitalization and globalization affect fertility behaviors. Well, indeed, just actually, I think a couple of months after I got the grant, we learned that, in fact, digitalization strongly, I mean, we already knew before, but we learned even better that digitalization strongly affects the ways we work, and globalization as well. So, yeah, at least thanks to the digital tools, we were able to work during the pandemics. And this type of work is probably, as Hill said, will probably stay with us, at least partly, which is why, I mean, our study is still based in the pre-pandemic context, and we are looking how those who worked from home in the previous decade, I mean, in the previous decade, how were their childbearing behaviors, but I mean, with some, I hope, can give us some insights, perhaps, about what can happen now in the, I hope, post-pandemic world. So, so even before the pandemic, the home-based work has been gaining on importance, and we collected some data just to show you. So in some countries, it was just very few persons working from home, usually or occasionally. The occasionally is the pink one, the lighter one. This was mainly the Eastern European countries of Europe and the Southern European countries. But in many, mainly Nordic and Northern European countries, this type of work was actually already quite widespread. Maybe not the usual, regular home-based work, but at least the occasional one. And you can see in the Nordic countries, the Netherlands, but also UK here. Can you actually see my cursor here? Yes. So also in the UK, this type of work was widespread, still before the pandemics. And here you can see the trends. And since the late 90s, home-based work was becoming quite widespread in some countries. Actually, in UK, this is an exceptional country. This form of work, this is this dotted line, was quite stable and was quite high already in the late 90s. And our study is actually based on UK, well, partly because of the data availability, but also because of the fact that this work arrangement was quite widespread there. So we can say a little bit more about this. But why actually is it so interesting to focus on home-based work and fertility? Well, so I'm talking about home-based work, that it increased here and that is becoming more widespread, but actually sometime in the past, home-based work was actually a norm. So in the agrarian times, in the pre-industrial era, people were working in the fields largely by their homes, and they often had children with themselves, and families were large. And it was only during the industrial revolutions when the home sphere and the public sphere, the work sphere, got separated. And men started to go to factories, especially during the second industrial revolution, started to go to factories to earn money to provide for the families, while women, at least after they became mothers, were staying at home and were taking care of children. So there was this separation between the private and public sphere, the term which is often now referred so to in the literature. And well, fertility was still quite high, but with time it started to decline. And with time, women also started to enter the labor market. And this massive entry of women into the labor market, largely after the Second World War, was often considered as one of the important reasons for the observed fertility decline. Why? Because at the time, women were receiving no support in combining work and care. The public childcare was not very much developed. Men were mainly responsible for providing income when were not providing much care. So there was a strong conflict between paid work and childcare. Now we have much more childcare, and men are already more involved in care, but still fertility is quite low. And the question which appears is whether the spread of the opportunities to work from home, which emerged, became available to us with the next industrial revolution, the digital revolution, can change this status quo. Can the fact that actually we are more and more able to work from home allow us to combine paid work and family better, and actually to bring the two spheres together, the private and the public one, and thus have the children that we want to have. So will actually this digital revolution and the fact that we can work from home help us to have children? And interestingly, there have been very few studies on this topic. Maybe because this work arrangement was not very widespread in the past. So with all our efforts, we were able to locate actually only one study by Sinivskaya and Billingsley, in which the authors looked how time and place flexibility at job, and that was like flexible working time, but also occasional home-based work, HBW, this is the shortcut that I'm using, whether this was positively related to fertility intentions in Russia. And they found a positive relationship. And that was the only study which addressed this home-based work explicitly. There were some other which referred to home-based work, like for instance by Bilari and Liu, which looked how the internet use affects fertility or fertility intentions, and they found actually opposite results. And some, like for instance, Bilari explicitly interprets the positive relationship between internet access and improving access to internet and fertility, that it might be because women have better work-life balance, they can work from home, and that's why there is a positive relationship, but it's not being tested in this study also. So, well, we decided to look more closely into this. And now, actually, what can we expect? So is it indeed that we can expect a positive relationship between home-based work and fertility? And you already probably know from time during the pandemics that the relationship may not be that obvious, and from all the struggles we had during this time. So, well, so home-based work indeed perhaps can have positive effect on fertility, since it may exactly like help us to combine paid work and care, but doesn't. And so what does the research tell us about this? So indeed, on the one hand, yes, because it allows us to save time. especially if we have to commute long time to work, or it also allows to save time, for instance, because we can, I don't know, cook the dinner, like put something in the kitchen and work in the meantime. So that's kind of multitasking. It can be, of course, questionable how well we can cook while working and the other way around, but can be done. Second, it can facilitate work-life balance because it allows for organizing paid work flexibly around childcare obligations, right? So, for instance, one can work a little bit in the morning, then bring children to the kindergarten, then do some home when they are in the kindergarten, then pick them up, and then perhaps finish the work in the evening. And also it may allow parents to be more present in children's lives, even if they don't require care anymore, can do things on their own, or they are taken care for by somebody else. Still the parent is more present and know what's happening to the child. But home-based work also has its negatives, and they were largely already also spelled out in the literature and demonstrated empirically. So, of course, all this multitasking and this organization of paid work around childcare obligations, it means that our work time is very much fragmented, and that we can actually also work at strange times during the day or in the evening, or that we don't sleep enough, and that can be all very stressful. And that can also lead to the blurring of the boundaries between paid work and family, which is often mentioned. So, well, that everything is organized at home, close to each other, it's very difficult to switch off. And one actually doesn't really know what is the working time and working space, and what is the working, what is the family, where is the time for the family time. And the last point is also that there are also like qualitative studies which show that women who work from home faced higher expectations from their partners or from their family members to perform housework or childcare. So you work all this time at home, so you could have cleaned or you could have cooked the dinner. Well, I was working, but that's of course the idea that we may get when the person works from home. So what does the studies actually, empirical studies, show us about how home-based work affects work-life balance? Well, they are very, very, very mixed. So certainly qualitative studies tell us that women do tend to use home-based work to combine paid work and care, and they say it explicitly that otherwise I wouldn't be able to work, that in this way I can actually accommodate the two spheres and combine them. And they don't really question the fact that they cannot perhaps, that it's very stressful, and that perhaps there might be other ways to do it, like for instance, dividing it more equally with the partner. And actually, that's the second point I wanted to mention, is that this home-based work can be used to combine the two spheres, especially when the partner is heavily involved in paid work, and when this division of paid and unpaid duties is unequal, and the woman feels she is mainly responsible for childcare, but I mean, she also wants or needs to work, then home-based work can be helpful for her. And indeed, the studies which examined the effects of home-based work on work-family balance are mixed. There were two meta-studies on the topic by Gayendran and Harrison and Allen and colleagues, and they found that the relationship is positive, but rather weak, because of many studies actually showing also negative effects. And studies also, these studies also showed that the work-life balance can be higher if home-based work does not entail long working hours, because sometimes it does, like this working in the evening or in general working longer, and when it when the conditions for a physical separation of the two spheres are better. So, for instance, good apartment, when one can have a separate room, for instance, to perform work. Okay, so that's about work-life balance. There can be, however, one more channel through which home-based work affects fertility, and this is via professional career. So home-based work may also affect the professional career, and it can affect it again in a positive way and negative way. It can affect it in a positive way because, first of all, it may allow some persons, especially mothers, to continue employment or to work a little bit longer than just short part-time because they can work from home. And indeed, studies confirm this. And it may also allow for minimizing work-related interruptions, and thus to be more productive and also save time a little bit on these work-related interruptions, and thus do the job that is needed to be done and then spend time with the family. But here it's about professional careers, so to avoid work-related interruptions and be more productive, and that we should have positive effect on the professional career. But there are also negatives, and studies show that working from home also means fewer networking opportunities, less influence over what happens at work, lower visibility, especially among the supervisors and bosses, or poorer access to training. And there are also studies which show that actually home-based work may also imply a flexibility stigma. So actually that those who work from home, they may actually perform quite a good job, but because they work from home, especially if these are mothers, women, they are perceived as more devoted to the family, not to work, and they are thus punished by employers. For instance, they are not getting promotion, and there are indeed studies which show that this happens. Okay, so what does this all imply for our study, and what does it imply for fertility? So after we make this whole literature review, we concluded that there cannot be any universal relationship between home-based work and childbearing, and that this relationship must depend on women's circumstances. And actually that's how we need to study it, to study not only what is the relationship in general, but actually in which circumstances it is positive and in which it is negative. So our first hypothesis is that the relationship depends on women's circumstances. And then second, we expect indeed a positive relationship between women's home-based work and fertility, when home-based work allows women for combining paid work and care. So for instance, where it allows them to save time, for instance, on commuting, or when they have this spacious apartment in which they can separate the two spheres so that they at least minimize the spillover, or when the home-based work doesn't lead to long working hours and larger work effort. And then they can combine. If they work longer, for instance, to minimize the negative consequences for their professional careers, then it doesn't really help work-life balance and fertility. Then second, we also expect that the relationship between home-based work, women's home-based work and fertility is more likely to be positive if women receive little support from their partners at home. So they work, but they don't receive much support. Their partners are highly involved in paid work. So then home-based work can be actually the only solution for them to work and combine paid work and family. So if they want to have a child, then home-based work should allow them this or help. And then next, we were also wondering about the consequences of home-based work for the professional career. So as demographers, we all know that the women's professional career, the relationship between women's professional career and fertility is very ambiguous. So the relationship can be negative. So working women are less likely to have a child because they have high opportunity costs. But on the other hand, well, now with time, more and more, actually, when they work, so when they work, they are that they want to work and they want to have both the career and children, or at least some paid work and children. So now this relationship is changing. So on the one hand, we expect that home-based work, there will be a positive relationship between home-based work and childbearing among women who do not experience negative consequences of home-based work for their work careers. Not because they want to work, but we also expect that if there is no other option, so the women are frustrated, the work is that they are punished for home-based work, but they have no other option to actually work. They cannot work in the office because, for instance, they already have children. Then in this case, they may actually give up. And in this case, this home-based work can be even positively related to the transition to the next child. So we kind of formulated this competing hypothesis, one that actually women who do not experience negative consequences of home-based work for their careers will be more likely to have a child, but we expect this will be more likely among women who do not have children yet, because then they can postpone childbearing and they can try to change their situation, improve, while among women who already have a child, it's more likely that this hypothesis 4B will be true. So because they may not have the other option. The partner is highly involved in work, they work from home. If they, okay, it's not good for their careers, but if they have no other options and they want to have a child, they will have to. And well, I'm talking about home-based work so far, but I didn't say that I mean what I mean exactly. So women can work from home, like regularly use this option. But there are also women who have access to this form of work and may not necessarily use it. They may think, okay, I have access, there is such a possibility. Maybe once I have a child, I will use this option. And we expect that those who have access, that this access to home-based work will be more important for fertility decisions of childless women, especially that they don't know what it means to have a child and they haven't worked from home yet. But they don't have any reason to work from home, so majority probably don't. While the use of home-based work may be important for the childbearing decisions of mothers, because they already have a child, maybe they work, and they can decide that this use of home-based work may be important for the decision to have the second child. So these are our expectations. And what do we do? So as I said, our study is based on the UK data, which is the UK Understanding Society data. We use the first 10 waves from 2009 to 2019. And we focus on employed women aged 18 to 44 who are living with a partner. So these are women who potentially can have a child. And well, we have quite a reasonable sample, as you can see, and we use like standard demographic method. So we estimate discrete time event history model for the transition to the first and transition to the second birth, separate models. So we observe women since they form a union till the first birth, and then since the first birth to the second birth. And all our variables are, of course, backdated at least by 1 year to account for the pregnancy. And our key explanatory variable is home-based work, and it takes 3 categories: no access, no use. So the woman has no access and doesn't use, of course. Second category, woman has access, but either doesn't use it or uses it occasionally. And third category, woman has access and uses this option regularly. And how is this variable constructed? So the survey provides us with following questions. One is, if you personally needed any which of the following arrangements are available at your workplace to work from home on a regular basis? Well, was one of the answers, and those persons and yeah, those persons who chose it were classified as those who have access to home-based work. And then these persons who had access, they were also asked, do you currently work in any of these ways? Do you currently work from home on a regular basis? And using these two questions, right, we classified our respondents as those who have access and have a regular use. This was on the basis of the second question. Then have access, but either use this option irregularly or do not use it, and it's quite blurred category. We are aware of this, unfortunately, and yeah, and on the basis solely of the first question, the remaining ones are those who do not have access and do not use home-based work. So that was the only option. There was one more question in the understanding societies, what is your place of work? I think the question was formulated like this. And then there was a possible option to choose I work at home, but there was very, very few respondents choosing this option, like 2%, which is far below the what the statistics, official statistics show, and also not really possible to model such a yeah, to get any reasonable findings from this category. So that's why we decided to use these questions and construct these measures. And okay, so this was our main explanatory variable, but as I said, we are not expecting that as I said, we don't think there is like one universal relationship between home-based work and fertility. We expect this relationship depends on women's circumstances, which means is moderated by various factors. Factors related to work-family reconciliation. So, for instance, what I said, this was our hypothesis, that those women for whom home-based work allows to combine paid work and care will have higher fertility. So because, for instance, they can reduce, they can save on commuting, or they have a good apartment, which allows to separate private life from the paid work, or the paid or the home-based work doesn't entail long work hours. For this woman, the home-based work may help to combine work and care, and thus they may have more children. So we use 3 moderators in which we interact with our home-based work variable, and these are commuting time. So we had information in the data, how long does it take the woman to commute to work, or would take her to, or how, yes, would take her to commute to work. Number of bedrooms, so how many bedrooms does your apartment have, and how long, and work hours, how long do you usually work? Then we expected that actually those women whose partners work at home, that those partners who are strongly involved in paid work, that they will if they work from home, these women, that they will be more likely to have a child, because that's the only solution for them to combine. So for this, as an indicator of this partner's involvement in paid work, we used partners' work hours. And then we had a hypothesis related to the fact whether the home-based work has negative consequences for women's work careers, and as an indicator for this, we use the job anxiety. So there was a question, how much you are tensed, how much do you feel tense, uneasy, or worried about your work, and we interact this indicator of job anxiety with the home-based work to test our hypothesis about the relationship between home-based work, consequences for the work careers, and fertility. So I move perhaps to the findings, and it will become clearer what we did. And of course, we use a bunch of control variables in our models, right? So women's age, type of settlement, whether it's rural or urban, partnership status, family orientation, and this one is important. So we control for the fact whether it's very important for the woman, how important the family is for the sense of who you are. That was the question, to control for women's family orientation. We have the income of both partners, the wave, like the time period, which captures the time period, and of course in the model for the second, for the transition to the second child, age of the first child. Okay, so now I move to our findings, and this is like the findings from the very basic model in which we just control for our control variables, but we don't perform any interactions. And here you can see the odds ratios. So you can see where this is our explanatory variable. So the reference category is that the person doesn't have access and doesn't use home-based work, and we can see actually that having access to home-based work and using home-based work regularly in these simple models actually has negative relationship to the transition to the first child, and no relationship when it comes to the transition to the second child. Yeah, but as we said, we think it depends on the women's circumstances. And well, so first we interact we interact the home-based work indicator with the minutes spent traveling to work. This interaction, the result of this interaction is presented on the slide. And as you can see, the pink line shows access regular use. So it's actually the most important, I think, one. And the orange one, access non-regular use, so the most blurred one. And as you can see, with the increasing, when the commuting time gets longer, the probability of first birth and the same probability for the second birth among those who work from home regularly, doesn't mean that all the time, the probability of the birth increases. We can see similar pattern for those who have access to home-based work but use it non-regularly when it comes to the transition to the second child, but exactly we don't observe this for the first child. So when it comes to the regular use, yes. When it comes to non-regular use access, well, the findings are quite blurred. Then the second interaction that we ran was between the indicator of home-based work and the apartment size. And as you can see here, actually the findings are astonishing. So we don't see much when it comes to the transition to the first birth. All the confidence intervals overlap. When it comes to the transition to the second birth, there is a positive relationship between the number of bedrooms and the transition to the second birth among women who have access to home-based work but do not use it regularly. So they may use it from time to time, they may not use it. And indeed, if the apartment is big, then they are more likely to have the second child. But if they use this option regularly, well, not really. Even the line goes in the opposite direction, which was astonishing to us. And we even perform like a triple interaction, three-way interaction. We expected that perhaps, okay, those who have large number of bedrooms, they probably live somewhere far away, so they also have long commuting time, so maybe there is something happening here, but I don't know, we didn't find anything which would shed additional light to these findings. Okay, then birth risks, we expected that birth risks will be lower when women work from home and when this home-based work entails long working hours. And well, a little bit, we do find it for the first birth, but it's not very strong, and mainly for this access, non-regular use of home-based work. We see also that the pink line is below the blue line, but well, the confidence intervals are also quite large. And basically nothing when it comes to the transition to the second birth. So we don't really find that if a woman works from home and this work entails long working hours, she that she is then less likely to have a child. And when it's less hours, so she's able to organize it in a way that she can work shorter, then she's more likely to have a child. And then we were expecting that when the partner is strongly involved in paid work, and the woman works from home, then perhaps she might be more likely to have a child, because then this home-based work is the only solution for her to have a child, because he's not very involved. And again, we don't find much for the first birth. As you can see, all the confidence intervals overlap. We don't find any significant difference for the access, regular use, and no access for the transition to the second birth. Something about access, non-regular use. So if the partner, but actually the direction is the opposite. So if the partner works a lot and she has access, but she doesn't uses it. I mean, maybe for some reason she doesn't use it, her risk of having the second child is lower. And finally, the consequences for the professional career. So we expected that women who work from home, that the home-based work may also have some consequences for their fertility via the impact of home-based work on their professional careers. So on the one hand, we expected that women who work from home, if their work from home endangers their professional career, then they may have a lower risk of having a child, especially the first child, because they can still postpone the first child. They can try to improve their situation in the labor market, maybe even get better established in the labor market, even if continuing to work from home. And then simply once they get more established, perhaps this arrangement doesn't have negative consequences for their work careers, and then they can have the child. And indeed, this we observe. So access and regular use of home-based work, if it's related to high anxiety at work, indeed the transition to the first birth is postponed, which is not so the case for women who do not have access to home-based work. But we also thought, okay, it can be the other way around. So women who maybe already have a child and work from home and do not have any other option. This home-based work has negative consequences for their careers, but they don't have another option to combine paid work and care. Perhaps they just give up. So they are not happy with this arrangement, it endangers their careers or whatever, but they don't have any other option. So they just give up and they go for the second child. And we find very strong effect of this sort. So they work from home, they are unhappy, they have high job anxiety, they are highly tensed and stressed at work, maybe because of home-based work, maybe of something else, this we don't know, of course, and they go for it to have a child, which is not the case for those who don't work at home, right? Okay, so that were our findings. We indeed found, so what we found for sure was no universal relationship between women's home-based work and fertility. Right? But apart from this, the findings were very diverse, I would say. And our hypothesis got confirmed only partly. Among those that got confirmed was that women who work from home indeed are more likely to have a first child if they don't have to commute long, and if they otherwise would have to commute long, if they worked in the office, and if they didn't experience if they don't experience anxiety at work. So somehow they don't at least perceive this work arrangement or anything else to threaten their work career. And we also find some positive relationships between use of home-based work and second births. And we do find it only, again, for women who otherwise would have to commute long and who actually feel job-related anxiety. So exactly the opposite then for the first child. And that's what we expected. Otherwise, we actually don't find anything like convincing or consistent with our expectations, relationship between home-based work, apartment size and fertility, or partners' involvement in paid work, or women's working hours involvement in paid work, home-based work and fertility. And also, we don't find the findings on the access to home-based work and fertility are quite inconsistent. So we actually expect that the access will be more important for childless women and less important for mothers. We don't find it, but we are also fully aware of the fact that and these are our limitations, that our measure of home-based work, especially this category, access but irregular use or no use, is quite broad. So, well, that may be also a reason for some of the inconsistent findings. Of course, we face selection problems. So, of course, not all women have access. In the pre-pandemic period, many women who maybe would have access to home-based work used it. Maybe only some selected women used it. Maybe some women even didn't know that they have access to it because it didn't even occur to them to ask. They just simply, they had to combine paid work and care. They used other arrangements. So of course, future research in the post-pandemic world is very much needed to shed more light on these relationships. Still, that's what we could do and what we could see. I mean, it seems that saving on commuting time is very important and actually also very consistent with the research on home-based work and work-life balance. And also these consequences for the professional career and some feeling of some job anxiety matter. But, well, much research, more research is needed on that. What we see here actually is that this relationship is very diverse, and actually we should look into the circumstances of couples to understand it. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. And well, I would be very happy to hear your comments and questions, since, as I said, this is work in progress.